All right. One thing I've learned about our friends here at the Accel Events virtual platform is even though this bar is going are live, but as always, friends in the chat, I'm able to see, I know that you are here. So could we do a hello in the chat if we are in fact live? Can we make sure that our fine panelists know that they're not to avoid? And I know that you guys are here, so come on over and say it. You can see that you are here. So say hello, friends. I'm not going to move forward until I confirm, in fact. All right, there we go. There's some humans. There we are. All right, here we go. Okay, welcome. We're here at the end of the introduced conference by Technically. Thank you so much. I know virtual events can be taxing. Thank you guys for coming in and out. A long day of conversations about building better companies. This is our final conversation. And here's the quick setup. In late 2019, hundreds of CEOs representing many of the country's largest and also most influential companies pledged to take a more complete view of corporate purpose. It marked a very prominent milestone in one of the era's most debated conversations. What is the role and responsibility for a private sector for civic good? That clearly reached a real fever pitch in 2020, timed perfectly with the 50th anniversary of a Hallmark essay that popularized the idea of maximizing profit and shareholder value. Here, we're going to talk about stakeholder value, a phrase borrowed from that letter around do more people benefit from the growth of companies. To do that, I'm joined by Caroline Barlerin, the CEO and founder of Platypus Advisors and a former global head of philanthropy at Twitter. Admas Kanyagia, the head of social impact at GitHub. Gwyneth Gaul, Senior Director, Strategic Partnerships and Community Impact at Comcast, NBC Universal. And Nyra Jordan, the Social Impact Investment Director at American Family Insurance. Thank you guys for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, this is going to be conversational. We're virtual. We know the feeling. In some of the cities we are in, it's beautiful out. So we're going to make it conversational and want you guys in. The chat, be active. We all know that if it's a virtual event, your brain will just melt if you just listen and share. So drop comments. If you want to mention Caroline's fantastic book collection behind her, do so. But let's try to make it a bit engaging. It is beautiful. Which is like, say hi, and you all have in some form worked with impact in corporate, private, startup environments. Like, what did 22 do for your own relationship to impact inside companies? So maybe Caroline, Admas, Nyra, Gwyneth, give me a hi, and what the heck did 2020 do to your relationship to impact at work?
Okay, well, hi everybody. It's good to be in community with all of you, and thanks for the opportunity, Chris, to be on this panel. These phenomenal women. There's this concept of VUCA, F-U-C-A. It stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. It was coined in 1984, but I think we are living in a VUCA world. Like 2020, it's saying like, oh my gosh, it is crazy out there, but in here. So it was crazy. It was VUCA like on the macro level of the world, the micro level, but also the meso level of our companies. And so I think that the 2020 was really a time that we shined a light on the importance of corporate social responsibility, social impact, social innovation, not just being like this bolt-on thing over there, but really core to the company and the company. So I think it reinvigorated a lot of CEOs to think more seriously about the role of purpose for their company. And that adaptability and flexibility is just going to be required, I think, more and more moving forward. Admas?
Yeah, no. And thank you, Chris. And hello, everyone who's joining us today. And hello to my fellow panelists. So excited to be in this conversation with you all. I have this incredible role of leading social impact at GitHub. And for those who don't know, GitHub is a developer tools company. And we think about ourselves as the place where developers come to share and collaborate on code. So as Carolyn said, 2020 was a tough year for all of us, personally and at work. And I think for those of us who are social impact leaders, we felt this really incredible juxtaposition. Like on one hand, we saw this, really deep impact that was happening to communities from 2020, where there's not just one crisis, but crisis and one after the other, one after the other, one after the other. And we saw this especially acutely for those communities that are least resourced, especially in terms of healthcare impacts, in terms of impact on low-income workers, impacts on nonprofits, impacts on Black and Brown and other marginalized communities around the world. But then also the other time we saw this like energy and momentum from within companies. And I was really, really happy to see that, where all of us seemed aligned almost like for the first time around this real commitment to supporting communities. And so we were able to unleash that at GitHub. You know, for example, like employees donated the most they have ever donated in 2020. And I think that's not true just of our company, that's true of all our companies. And so it's just this time where we saw a real need, demand, and alignment for more and more social impact work at companies. And on one hand, I was very happy to see that, but also very sad to see the, you know, just ongoing. And again, as we moved into 2021, the crises are not stopping, and this is now the new normal. Nyra, do you want to go next?
Yeah, thank you. I'll go next. I'm so happy to be here today, and I will echo, I'm so thrilled to be on this panel with these incredible women that are leading social impact. And, you know, as I was reflecting on this, it took me back to how I kind of got started into this work. You know, the American Family Insurance Institute for Corporate and Social Impact launched in 2018 as kind of an extension of our corporate responsibility strategy. And we partner with public and private sector organizations, and we invest in entrepreneurs, and we work with nonprofits, and we hope that we support the ability to scale enterprises. But, you know, since the inception of the Institute, and this question also took me to a personal place, because since the inception of the Institute, I've been working to, you know, in the VC space, in the nonprofit space, advocating for laws, working internal to our organization, just really deep work in this space for several years, doing the work. And I think I've been doing a pretty good job of compartmentalizing this work. And I will say 2020 changed that for me. You know, we're working from home. As others have said, we're in these multiple crises. We're watching these incredible things unfold right before our eyes because we're in this bubble of this pandemic. And so we're watching George Floyd's murder. We're watching Ahmaud Arbery. We're hearing about Breonna Taylor. And at the same time, we're witnessing all of this energy around social justice movements. We're seeing COVID. And for me, it became really difficult to separate the two. Like it all started to merge. And for me, as well as I think our company, for American Family, it created this sense of urgency around not only acting, but I think also enabling me personally to lean into my lived experience in this space. And I think I've used that to actually inform some of the work that we're doing. I've relied so much on communities, and I've separated myself from the community, and I'm part of this community. So for me, it's how can I continue to lead? How can I inform decisions based on what I've personally experienced, especially over these past 12 to 18 months? But I'd also echo what's been said in terms of it galvanized efforts across our enterprise in a way that we had not seen, because I think so many of us were feeling this compounded trauma around all of these crises that we were experiencing. So we did see increased in employee activism, employee giving. We engaged within the startup community of how we could support startup entrepreneurs and artists and musicians who were impacted by COVID, who in some cases that stream of revenue just ceased. And so for us, it was not only urgency, but also how do we think differently about how we support our communities. So again, personally, as well as an organization, the sense of urgency, but also I think we expanded our impact a little bit.
Yeah. So hi, I'm Gwyneth. I have the pleasure of leading. I was like ready to dive right into conversation. I have the pleasure of leading strategic partnerships on the community impact team for Comcast, NBC Universal. I came to the team just months before the pandemic. I actually swore I would never go in-house at a company because I had just seen bad corporate philanthropy before. I've spent the last 20 years working in social impact, from from my hometown in Pittsburgh to DC, global, Silicon Valley, you name it. And I was just really struck by the incredible breadth of platforms that Comcast, NBC, Universal had, and a real commitment to try to do things differently and to double down on their commitments. And I think kind of coming into that frame of mind and then getting hit with 2020 and everything that occurred, it just accelerated, I think, that desire to pull on the various different levers that the business has. I think our work became less and less about this kind of nicety and this thing that, is a nice little thing that happens over here in the community, but really business critical. And I think that was one of the biggest shifts that I saw across the board last year from a CSR perspective. I think, we also saw a lot of companies making really big commitments to racial equity, racial justice in a variety of different ways. It'll be interesting to see how those continue. I can say at Comcast, when we made our $100 million commitment to racial equity, it was a moment where I saw collaboration. We've talked a lot about adaptability, but collaboration and commitment in a way that I have never seen in corporate philanthropy before. We had business units from all different shapes and sizes coming together for one common cause to really drive impact that I think allowed us to get real focus, to engage our people, and I think it'll enable us to continue this movement beyond 2020, so that we can ensure we continue to drive change. We not just make good on our 3-year commitment, but our 10-year, and we can continue. So I think 2020 just, I think it brought the expectations of our work to a place that it's never been before.
Sorry, I got a touch of feedback there.
Pause for a dramatic effect.
Yeah, no, it was good. For some reason, you looped there a minute in my headphones. So, all right, incredible, these stories. I think this idea of widening the responsibility of startups, growth companies, corporations has a degree of skepticism to it. That this is something added on. I think I'm forgetting who mentioned that idea of like this is bolted on. Admas, like GitHub is an incredibly influential developer tool resource. Why the heck is there an impact team at GitHub? What are you doing there?
I mean, sometimes I ask myself that question, but no, I'm actually, I mean, because it was a surprise. I have a long career working in the social sector, working, directly with beneficiaries, with nonprofits, in communities, helping to influence social sector actors. And so this role, even at GitHub, was sort of the first time for me to work for a company, and to think about bringing in both. I love that Nyra talked about sort of lived experience, but also just, finding a place for building this kind of capacity within the private sector. And there was openness. So GitHub has had a really long history and legacy of social impact, even since its very early startup days. It was one of the 5, company values when the company was originally created, and this has been, and I think will always be, part of the ethos of the company. One of the reasons I joined GitHub was because of the mission to be the home for all developers and its vision to accelerate human progress. And those are lofty words, but I really believe that the intention in the company is to do exactly that. The company is really committed to this larger ecosystem. So, our platform, our global community of over 65 million developers, and also to this idea that technology can be an enabler for human progress. So this all makes social impact quite relevant and really part of that mission and vision. It also brings this much wider view of stakeholders where, what I also love about GitHub is, we're not here just only for our customers. We're here for this larger mission. We're here for this larger community. And this community, we want to be inclusive of everyone, even those who are least resourced. So as a result, our team is here to try to bring some of that mission and vision to life. And we do, work very similar to many of my other colleagues on the panel around leveraging the company's assets and not just thinking about philanthropy. We're a small company. We don't have a lot of money to give away, but we have opportunities to leverage really powerful parts of our business for social good and to particularly help build the capacity of nonprofits and social sector organizations. And we know if we can find those opportunities for more power and potential within the business, we can make more change happen for communities. And so that's why GitHub has a social impact team. Our stakeholders care about this. Developers on our platform care about this. Our employees care about this. Our customers and partners do as well. Because I think that what is now becoming quite obvious, to everyone is that companies have a role and need to play a role on supporting particularly communities that need our help and support. So yeah, that's why I'm here.
And I think that's beautiful. I mean, Nyra, let me go to you. Like, the stakes are pretty high right now for business leaders. I think it's uncontroversial to say that we have very high expectations for the breadth of stances that we want taken. And that wasn't always the case, right? Like we kind of, for a long while, we almost like there was a punchline that corporate America was polite and like stayed out of it and problematic by some standards or just like, strategy by others. That ain't the case. In 2020, it made that as clear as ever. Is this good? Is that net good? I think there is a case to be made that we are entering very uncharted territory. Is if every startup founder suddenly has to have a political stance about a coup in Myanmar, and we also want our corporate leaders to have a vast perspective on a variety of social issues. Like, talk to me a bit about whether you think this is going in the right direction in for positive outcomes.
Yeah, I do believe this is going in the right direction. I do think this is a good thing. And I think we talk about things that maybe have been politicized that really are speaking to justice. And so we think about policies and systems, and we think about what is going to benefit our communities. And so frankly, for us, we think this is a good thing. We've actually created $105 million commitment at American Family that we call Free to Dream, that is to support partnerships and investments that are in the social justice space. And frankly, we believe that our company is better and our communities are better when we do what we can to enact change on these social issues. Our communities, we feel, are mirrored through our enterprise, and inequities and policies and systems impact our employees. They impact our consumers. So that's why our social impact focus is embedded in our corporate strategy. We feel that it's who we are. It is not a strategy that's separate from any of our business goals. And so, for us, we recognize that social impact not only helps those in need, but it will also position us to be in a better place to serve customers and communities while presenting more innovative approaches to problem solving. So we're a mutual company. Our owners are our policyholders, and we do everything we can to support them while living up to the three arms of our mission, which is to inspire, protect, and restore dreams. And we feel like that's not about, it's more than just being about American Family. It is intended to inspire, create, and support partnerships with other companies, organizations, and the public sector to effectively address societal issues together. And so we're going beyond the words and are, taking what we believe are deliberate and collaborative actions that result in what we hope is profound change. And so beyond the writing the check, we believe that the private sector, it's already been expressed, but we have a role to play, a crucial role in partnering with communities to expand equity. So, the way we think about this, when we think about our role within social justice and some of these sense of social issues, is that when we commit to making positive impacts in the area that align to our core beliefs and our core values, that we can have influence. So we can influence our customers who want to do business with us. You can influence local leaders across sectors. And then when we can influence a new way of doing business for our customers. And we think that's the power in driving impact, that if we are partnering across sectors in this work, it's that collective momentum where you get to see the potential for large scale change because everybody is working towards these issues together. So that's why we believe it's a good thing. And that's why we think it's important for organizations to engage.
Gwyneth, I mean, hearing Nyra say that, like, what makes me, you work at a company that I think a lot of people have a lot of feelings. You guys should be investing how much, how do you make the bets? What's going into like deciding this is where we're going to invest? That I have to feel like all of you are thinking about in some way.
I think
value, like,
I think it's a great question. And I think something that companies historically have struggled with, to be honest. I think one of the things that I can say for Comcast is that it sharpened our focus. It really deepened our commitment to digital equity. I think, a lot of people have a lot of feelings about where we should invest our funds and resources. And I think we have to take a step back and really think about what are we as a business uniquely positioned to do. And those are the assets beyond our philanthropic dollars that we'll be able to bring to bear for good in communities. And so I think having that sharp strategic focus, being authentic to who we are as a business, will really enable us to drive impact in community. And so I think while we thought a lot about social justice in 2020, more so than perhaps ever before, that is really kind of the underpinning for us as we think about our commitment to digital equity. We think that that's both a moral and an economic imperative. We believe that you can't address any equity issues at scale without tackling digital equity. And so again, I think really just building out that framework and having real intentionality and focus around what we will invest in will allow people to see us as leaders and see us as standing for and representing something rather than scattered a little bit here, there, and everywhere. And so again, we don't have a massive philanthropic checkbook, but we have incredible platforms, incredible people, and the scale of our company is unlike anything I've seen. So if we can harness that collectively for one common issue that we want to try to address, I mean, it's that would be the true success. So I think we've spent a lot of time 2020 building out our framework, really getting our focus nailed down. And I think that will allow us not, again, just to leverage those philanthropic assets, but those business assets as well. You may have seen that kind of come to life in a way. We've launched Comcast Rise, which probably historically might have been an initiative that lived within the business, and it would have been something that our Comcast business team took on, and they went out and did tech makeovers for small businesses and communities. Then you saw our effective advertising team came in. You saw the philanthropic team came in. You saw the government affairs, and all of a sudden we have this collective effort to think, how can we best provide resources and services to the small business community that was hit hardest from COVID. And so I think that collective focus and energy and leveraging the business assets we have allows us to kind of make those bets and say no when we need to, frankly.
Sometimes some of that makes sense that, economic growth can benefit those who can be good for a company that needs economic growth to grow their own business. Darren, I see your note there, and I think you're right. I kind of made this passing joke about startup founders needing to make statements about Myanmar, which is a little tongue in cheek. But I think I think the line that he Darren's real in the chat, that a line we even made we had reporters that protested after the killing of George Floyd last year that we ultimately felt was entirely appropriate, even given newsroom objectivity standards, because those are protests about human rights. It was about like so foundational quality that this was not. It was deeply unpolitical. It was a human rights issue. But I think perhaps in my mind I play out how this goes. I think that's a good call out there, Darren. Caroline, I don't want to go too deep down a particular case study, but I feel like I have a example in mind of late. The influential project management firm Basecamp. This might be super familiar to some of you, might not be familiar to others of you, but little 60-person, but culturally influential company that has a CEO who has written a bunch of books. I think I literally have one of his books here, has shaped a lot about what workplace culture is, comes out and says in public forum on their company internal sites, can't talk about politics. And however you feel about that, I almost feel like I want to set that aside. A third of his staff quit in the space of 2 weeks. That feels like, set aside your feelings about that. That seems like maybe that's the big idea. But I wonder what your takeaway is. You've been inside companies making stances and shaping staffs. You advised folks on that now. How did you read this Basecamp case study? And if folks don't know what the heck I'm talking about, I'm sure we'll get a link in the chat. But what did you feel from your perspective, Caroline?
Well, it's definitely a case study worth studying if you're a leader, because I think there's the top down and the bottom up. But you're right, like Basecamp, they've written 5 books on culture. Like one was a New York Times bestseller, and I think these founders' goal was to like reset the culture to say let's focus on their product, and that really focus. But I think that way employees heard it as willful ignorance. You need to kind of dimensionalize the story, which we won't really get into, but it's really is around this idea of like, by trying to purge political partisanship in the workplace, we are actually muting voices of lived experiences. We're actually dampening diversity, inclusion, belonging efforts. Before 9/11, there was no conversation in workplaces around politics or religion, but the idea of bringing your identity to work is something that is so critical today, but also where the lines blur between what's happening outside the world and the role that the CEOs play of having the empathy, having the listening, having the learning. So rather than clamping down and saying, we don't want to hear it, I think there's a real opportunity to need to hear it more. If you don't design, company policies to optimize for justice, you're going to reinforce systemic injustice. And this is a perfect playbook of really seeing this. And the fact that, people vote and said, I'm out, and really high talented people who've been there a really long time left because of this, shows that you're hurting your team, you're hurting yourself. So it's not even as moral imperative, but business imperative. And the case study doesn't stop at Basecamp. There's, Coinbase's leaders talking about different things about, are the companies made for profit versus purpose? I know I just was literally talking to a social impact leader last night, and she was saying that, having the poster in the cubicle that said Black Lives Matter was okay, but having one that said Make America Great Again wasn't. And how do you thread the needle on where voices and freedom of expression? It's very, very hard to do these days. But instead of saying we're not going to listen and we're not going to need to hear it more, and we need to be trained and ensure the safety, belonging, and inclusion of all these voices. And that's on the leaders, top down and bottom up, to do that together. So it's worth, it deserves a whole own panel, I think. But
yeah,
it's an important topic to cover.
Yeah, I felt like I wanted to, but I think you're right. There was an entire conversation about how you set values that aren't just words you put on a wall, but are values you go back to and make hard choices. And I think also the point is that I don't think that story's done yet, because I think we're going to see some different takes over the next 5, 10, 15 years, and we're gonna this is gonna get played out in a lot of interesting ways. Let me bring us back to the stakeholder capitalism, and thank you guys for questions dropping in the comments. I will be going to these, but so stakeholder capitalism, which kind of sound like a clinical phrase, but it means something. It was supposed to be a response to shareholder value above all else. Stakeholder value is supposed to say, well, you have your shareholders and you have your employees and your community members, and there's a bigger basket that you have to consider your top priority. I think one criticism coming out of that Business Roundtable letter, where some of that language is from, and even some of these conversations, is good old-fashioned PR. that the corporate philanthropy arm is just PR, that some of the it's all in pursuit of shallow gains to kind of to wash over really difficult conversations. I happen to know the four of you, so I happen to know that you guys as individuals feel very differently, but I wonder if we can get at this issue of, is the impact work happening inside companies, big, small, or other? How do we know it's not just talk to make us feel better about other work we're doing? How do you guys know that this is something meaningful? Admas, I know there's something right at the tip of your tongue. I can see it.
She's muted.
Did I lose? Oh, I think I lost your audio, Admas. Is that?
Muted.
About that. Can you hear me now?
You can.
Yes,
Great.
yes.
Yeah. So yes, how do we know it's not all talk? I think that's sort of part of the complexity, that I think that we all have to hold as we take into doing this work. We are very, very interested. I think many of us on this call are very, very interested in deep and sustained long-term change. We're not in our roles because we want to be on the cover of a, flashy story or make, headlines. There is the reality that sometimes this work does provide some reputational uplift to companies, and that's okay, but that's not why we do this work, and that's not where we focus and what we focus on. We want to focus on that deep and long-term sustained change that Gwyneth was talking about, that Nyra was talking about, to hold that complexity that Carolyn was talking about. And so, if that's all that this work was about, like, our jobs would, not that PR is easy, but our jobs would be much easier. But because we are trying to do that long-term change, we're trying to think about ways in which we can, make impact on the business, so we're holding sort of this dual purpose in our head of how do we make impact on the business in terms of, driving opportunities to address either business challenges or identifying new opportunities through this focus on social impact. And then at the same time, we're trying to make impact on communities where we can see actual contributions that have made changes on communities. And so, and I think most of us who do this work are more interested in the long-term change and doing work that requires that long-term investment. And so that's how I know it's not just talk. I think that if it was just that, then the solutions and the things that we're working on would be very surface level, but that's not what we're interested in.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, I think we have a real opportunity. It's easy to say, oh, there's another news release with another corporate announcement, and they've made this commitment or they've given this gift. I think the reality of it is that, of course, there is some, positive uplift for the brand, but there's also tremendous uplift for the issues, the organizations, the partners we're investing in. And we have a real opportunity to use our microphones, our platforms, to be able to raise awareness of the digital inequities that exist, for example, for Comcast and some incredible organizations that are leading the way to address that. And if that is addressed through PR opportunities and news releases, so be it. But I think we have that responsibility as well to use that voice.
Great point, Gwyneth.
I agreed. I was going to actually ask this to Nyra. I think we may have lost her to an internet connection or the like. I don't know what the in-person metaphor would be of a panelist just kind of like disappearing. But
your mic not working.
Yeah, all right. That's right. Not just being, taken away. But, Admas and Gwyneth, what you made me think about, I remember having a conversation with a someone else in CSR. This is dating, this is going back a few years, but I remember her saying to me that she thought her job was to argue that the brand lift justified their corporate philanthropy, because she viewed that as why she knew her work would last. That she was proud of saying, look, we're doing good, but it makes a business case too. And I think lots of people might have different feelings about that, but that stuck with me, that was her stance of that's what I'm trying to thread this needle and get our impact work so intertwined with our that I know our impact work makes sense. Does that resonate?
Yeah. I think it resonates from the fact that I think all of us have to think about impact on the business, that we can't solely focus on impact on communities. Again, we have to hold that complexity that you can do both things at the same time. And so I think one of the ways that, impact on the business was measured as a result of CSR work was looking at impact on the brand and reputational uplift. But it does not have to be the only measure. One of the things that we're trying to think about is like, how do we use our work to better inform our product, so that we're building a product that can reach those that are least resourced. That is going to have impacts on us having better products out there for everyone and all of our users, opportunities to meet new markets. We're thinking a lot about sort of like, what does global expansion look like, and how could our work be, again, helpful to the business, and thinking about reaching communities that in which technology could make incredible change for them, and how do we integrate that into the business. We think a lot about sort of our impact on the business in terms of employee engagement and employee retention. And so there are other business metrics that I think can also speak to much more of this long-term and sustained change. And we always have to be holding both those in our minds at the same time. I'm just saying, like, let's not just only count brand impact. There are more actually, interesting and much more compelling things to count.
Yeah. Admas, building off of what you're saying, I think with a stakeholder is just looking at all the different audiences, not the shareholder. And I wrote the professors, at Harvard, said, like, if you want to come up with if you want to build innovation within your company, have your employees go out and solve problems in their community. And attracting, developing, and retaining top talent, it's table stakes now to have purpose at the center, because the next generation of employees did volunteering in high school and in college, and if they're going to be a neuroscientist or a data scientist or a neurosurgeon, they're going to expect to have purpose, not service and purpose, at the core of their company. Check the top engineers at a tech company, or the top talent wherever you are. That's a currency to play in. I also, I think consumers are getting much more sophisticated in this. So there's that cynicism of the greenwashing, the now woke washing, if you will, of just being very thoughtful about how you're going about it in a really authentic way, because people are kicking the tires as consumers, and even in B2B. Porter Novelli just came out with some research, 2021. I don't know if you all saw it, but it said, silence has a consequence. So 6 out of 10 Americans, 59%, say it's no longer acceptable for a company to be silent on social justice issues. And further, 49% said that if they assume that a company that remains silent on social justice issues doesn't care. So, you can vote with your feet, and you can vote your wallet, and you can choose to work someplace else, or you can choose to invest in someplace else. So I think it's we're all growing up in our sophistication, understanding about the role of the company from the employee side, the employer side, the investor side, the consumer side, the customer side, and the citizen side.
Yeah, I
Nyra,
think the expectations are greater than ever. We did miss you.
Internet, technology.
Yeah.
That darn internet. I don't know. I'll talk to.
Talk to someone, Gwyneth.
Never gets old.
That's not right. I only have you guys for a few more minutes, and I have a couple comments here. If there's other stuff that you guys want to throw out, do throw that out. But a couple here that I do wanna hit on. And actually, I might be riffing on something, Darren, you might have put this morning in one of the sessions, if I can remember correctly, or someone did. That this idea of stakeholder capitalism, when 50 years ago the mantra of profit above all else, that is a clarifying mission, that it was not seen as jest, it was put forward as that clarifies how we most efficiently and maximize. What I think has come up a couple times in today's conference is we've learned a lot more. Perhaps we knew it then and chose to ignore it, but we really recognize now, particularly when when people are your most valuable asset, that's who you need to respond to. And, Caroline, when you're calling out that data of like, it's overwhelming. Some of our more serious professionals, technologists, and the like are making the demand that this stance happens. So in addition to the brand lift Admas stuff that you tied on, Nyra, I wanted to wonder how much you think of this as value to the organization by making sure we live the expectations of our employees. This is an attraction and retention story. Like this is, if we do great work, we will have more teammates who want to be part of this organization. Is that a rational part of the impact work you do?
I think that's absolutely a rational part of the work. I think, someone said earlier, this whole idea that when you show up authentically and you have conversations. I was sharing this earlier in a meeting I was in just right before the verdict for the Chauvin trial. I had colleagues just reach out, text messages, Slack messages, hey, thinking about you. I know this is impacting you because they know I have a son, they know I have a husband. And so I feel that is why that's important, because I think historically we show up to work and these things have happened to us and we put on the face, I'm here to work, I'm here to be professional. And now to be in a culture and to be in a society with employees saying, no, this stuff is happening and I'm feeling it and I need to own that and I need you to know that, because I may just need space. I may need time. I think that is what is important. And so because so many of the things that are happening in communities where our customers and our employees live, that it's no longer separate, I think it is absolutely table stakes that we start to have these conversations and say, I hear you. And while I may not understand, I am acknowledging that this is happening and it may have an impact on you. Mm-hmm. So I absolutely think that it's important. If we're saying we want people to bring all of themselves to work, it has to be all of themselves to work. And that means all of the things that when they walk out of those doors or shut off the Zoom, that we're acknowledging there are things going on that are impacting you that I may not understand or know, but I get it. And you are a valuable employee to me. So I need to make sure that I'm aware and I acknowledge that.
One question here from the chat that I really like, that I think it's dead on. I wonder how much you guys are thinking about when an issue or a moment rises to the moment when it needs, top level response, we need to get a letter out to employees versus, or like when we want to make an investment in solving that problem. What kind of conversations are you guys having? Has that evolved over the last year? What is an issue that we have to, how close is it to our business? Like how much of that is coming into your conversations?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I would say that we're thinking a lot about this because I think, what 2020 showed us is that, we're not going to be free of crises. There's just like one after the other. And man, all of them are egregious. All of them are large enough. It's not even like we're getting one large one and then tiny ones, like every single one. And so I think, we're trying to develop a framework around it. And, it's not easy because I think that, using sort of employees as an important variable, that what they feel, where they're located, the communities they're close to, the communities and identities they represent, like that is actually one of the key variables that we think about in terms of like when we do respond. Most of all, we want to be able to, take care of employees and help take care of their communities, most of all. But then not all these cases sort of fit in that like very neat bucket. And so we have to start to think about, is there like, is this an area of work in which we have made previous investments? Are there partners that we work with in that geography or that place that, while we may not have employees, we have a vested interest or intentions and aspirations for the business? But, there is no framework that's out there that makes this really easy. I think that, all of us are sort of like trying to take this case by case. And then I think most of all trying to, we have limited capacity. We don't have like complete, like, deep reservoirs of time, energy, and money so we also have to start to be strategic and intentional about, how do we move from being like reactive to being more proactive? And so I think that's a conversation I'm seeing to start across the field, which is good because hopefully that means, again, that we can do that long-term work, that we can start to look at like, systemic causes and barriers versus the symptoms of the problems that they face. And that most of all, that we're investing more, but, as strategically and as intentionally as we can be. So, but I wonder if the rest of the panelists, how are you all thinking about this?
I think very similar to what you it out. We have business resource groups, employees groups that inform a lot of that. And we also have a team that when something does come up that we feel as a company, we want to make a formal statement, we come together and kind of talk that through and really look at the implications of it, but definitely employee informed.
Yep. Same.
There's also just the proximity piece of like how close it is to the employees that are touched or the customers or where you are. But I think that's changed in the past year just because of the geographic confines being broken with Zoom. And, like, let's just take an issue of like hand washing. Like hand washing is a really important issue. That should be our signature issue. Well, if you're, say, your Twitter or your Caesars, hotel, like Caesars Hotel actually has authentically a product of like all of the people getting the soaps and redoing the soaps with the charity to do hand washing in a more authentic, better way or better business. It's better for their product, for their business than if Twitter said, oh, we're going to do hand washing. So it is figuring out the part of if we're systemic thinkers, which everyone is systems thinkers, everyone on this call is, that you want to make change, but it's also figure out what can you authentically do with the assets you have. And cash is one universal, but beyond the cash, your product, how can you leverage and harness the power of your product to make impact in a meaningful, sustainable way?
That's such a good point, Caroline, because I think it's something that we're also always asking ourselves, like, can we make a unique contribution that only we can make and no one else can make to this issue? And on some issues, like, I have to be like, what we would offer would not be a unique contribution and we wouldn't be able to move the needle. And so, again, it doesn't mean that we do nothing, but it changes and informs the approach that we take for that particular situation.
Yeah,
I love that note. We gotta head out. We're 2 minutes over, but I wonder if you guys could each send me out with a fare thee well and anything you would want a community of entrepreneurs, HR pros at growth companies, also like an array of stakeholders at other large corporates and the like when they're thinking about the role of company for profit in their community. Something you want to send people home with, and maybe we'll go reverse order on the way out. Gwyneth, Nyra,
sure.
Admas, Caroline.
You got it. I mean, I would say 2 things. One, let's not make 2020 a moment. I know I said this the other day when we were chatting, but it's so easy to say, oh, this was a moment in time. We all came together and then we went back to the way things were. Let's not do that. Let's make sure this moment extends to a movement and continues for that long, sustained change that we're all deeply committed to. And I think 2 is collaboration is going to be key. I think gone are the days where companies, philanthropies, people tried to go it alone and tackle an issue. This has got to be all of us coming together collectively to address common issues. And so think about ways to collaborate and innovate together. I know it's something we're thinking a lot about. So those would be the two parting ways.
And Nyra, Admas?
Yeah, I think my final message would be that similar to what's been said, I don't think that we can sit back as leaders within influential organizations and wait for something to happen. I think we have a role to play. I think customers expect companies to stand for something. And I think with this collective involvement across sectors, it can become that movement. And we're proud to be one of the companies driving to enact some of that change. I think it's just something that we are excited to see many others continue to get involved in. And so I think that is absolutely the message of how can we work together to keep this going and just leverage the momentum that's already underway.
Yeah. No, those are such great points, Gwyneth and Nyra. I definitely would double down on this idea of collaborating together. Like, this is not a place where we need to take any kind of competitive stances. It benefits no one, especially disadvantages the communities that we care about. And so very excited. And I think that is the orientation of many leaders in social impact is how do we learn and collaborate together? And then I think the last thing I would say is be intentional about what you can uniquely contribute, that it's something that, we're always thinking about. We always want to respond, but, how do we be intentional and more strategic so that, we can hopefully try to end some of these, really pervasive social issues that have plagued us for a long time.
There's a lot of wisdom having been dropped. I think, what would it look like for corporations to put equity at the center? And I think that if we could explore, if you will, how to save capitalism from itself, I think that that is the chapter that we are in now. It's work we have to do. And it's the work we're going to start doing is really the people closest to the problem are the ones closest to the power. And we need to shift to make that happen.
I think that's a fantastic way to go out. Thank you guys for this conversation. Thank you everyone in the chat and the many of you who are listening. And I super appreciate it. That has been today's Introduced. That's the annual conference on building better companies. As always, recaps will run on Technically next week. And we'll see you on the other side. So thank you everybody. And thank you to our panelists. I super appreciate the time and the perspective. And we'll see you next time, everybody. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Perception. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Exactly.
You will.
See you guys.